It is 7:45, and I hope Mr. Kilgore is attending us by Zoom because I'm calling the meeting to order. There were no citizens to be heard, so I'm going to move on.
Mr. Middleman, can you take a roll call, please?
Oh, sorry. I'd like to take a roll call. Moretta
Scott is present.
Dathan. Barry Middleman present. We do have a quorum. Thank you. I'm going to, since there are no citizens to be heard from the public, I want to go to the consent agenda and see if anyone would like to make a motion for the approval of our minutes.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as it is.
Seconded.
The minutes have been approved. Well, I believe that,
Should we vote?
We need a vote,
Oh.
Mr. Middleton.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Unanimous in favor. We're going to move right into the meat of this meeting and invite Ms. Rogers up. This is a public hearing, discussion, and possible action on an application submitted by Francis Rogers, 101 Sunflower, for the proposed renovation of a commercial building. And I'd like if we could to have a brief presentation by you, Ms. Rogers, and then we'll go from there.
I'm requesting permit or also to renovate the building. 3 Sunflower Lane was a duplex or 1 unit for our business.
Is the microphone on up there? Anybody? I don't think it's on, Louis. I don't think it's on. It is on? Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. I can. Yeah, can you? Unplugged. Well, if you can't do it, we still probably can hear her.
Mr. Middleman, when Mr. Zamaron has got this problem solved, if you'll announce that you're opening the public hearing on this item and state the
Okay.
time as well.
I will.
Mr. Kilgore's waiting for admission to the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I am opening the public meeting, and now if you wouldn't mind start, and that meeting is being public agenda is at 6:49. Would you mind starting over, Ms. Rogers?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm going to move this in front so I can get closer to the mic. So we are asking for y'all's approval to renovate the building at 101, 103 Sunflower Lane. It was 2 units. We'd like to convert it into 1 unit and make it into an office park, an office building that my business would then occupy. We're going to have 13 offices and 2 conference rooms. There'll be the side patio that we also want to be able to have networking events on for our clients and for the community of Castle Hills, because we're very much into pro networking, pro small business. The sample here in front is what we are requesting for the exterior of the building. It will be stucco on all 4 sides. Currently, it is only stucco in the front, but we will be doing all 4 sides with black trim, and that's what the sample is there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the gist of it. You know, I mean, we're going to totally be redoing the front of it. And you making it right now, the way the water runs, we're going to be raising it up so that water won't be going in the front of our building. And so, you know, we're y'all have got the plans for all that we'd like to do.
What you're planning?
Well, the plan, like I said, is we're going to raise the front of it. Right now, the roof line kind of does this, where it kind of, it goes, if down in the front, we want to raise it up to where instead of doing this, it does this, right? And so it'll have, the front will go all the way up and there'll be windows across the front of the building. The roof line, the way it works is there is a kind of a wall around it. So there will be one AC rooftop unit, but because of the way the roof line goes, there will be a wall, so it will not be visible from the street. There currently is a rooftop unit on there already that is not visible, and we'll be putting another one right in the exact same spot that it was before. And so then there'll be, the other units will be behind the building, so again, it will not be visible from the street.
Okay. Mr. Schnall, are we, would we be, have the ability to start asking questions at this time?
When Ms. Rogers finishes her presentation during the public hearing, you can close the public hearing and then open it up for questions from the commission.
Okay.
So I think the only other thing that besides that is that there are some trees we want to take out that we are notated in the packet. One is it's right at the front door that is so close to the building that it's kind of, to me, it's too close to the building. In the very front of it, there's a bunch of trees in the back of the building that are they considered trash trees and or they're already dead. They're also damaging the retaining wall down into the drainage area. So we want to get all that cleaned up. There's another tree that's right at the corner of the tree, right behind, next to the lawyer's building, right behind the lawyer, and it's already causing structural damage to the lawyer's building. And so that's another tree we are requesting to be removed. The big tree in the middle of the parking lot, we are going to keep. The tree up at where the signage would be, we're keeping. And we're open to planting more trees once we get all of that cleaned out a little bit to see if we can plant some more trees across the front of the on the street side. But we haven't determined that yet. We're waiting to see, you know, how the drainage is going to be impacted with us raising the parking lot up and everything. And that's really all the only thing I really have to say, unless y'all have open for y'all's questions.
Well, if you're completed, we will be closing the public hearing at 6:53 and open the floor to questions from our committee. And I'd like to take the lead on this.
Okay.
The concrete paving on the north side of the building, is that drainage or is that where you're going to do the patio? What was that planning?
That's the existing patio that's already there. And so we're going to fix it. It's all cracked and crumbling. So we do want to fix it up and be able to use that as a patio when we have events or for our employees to be able to sit out there on a nice day and have lunch. But there won't be any permanent structures in that area. So that, again, the water would be able to continue to drain down there into the drainage area behind the building.
Do you have a dumpster that you'd have located on the property?
At the moment, there is no dumpster. There was a construction one when we were kind of cleaning out the junk within the building. Our plan, once we move into it, is not to have a dumpster, but to have one of those trash containers that we roll up to the street.
Okay.
And again, that would be it would live on the side of the building where the cement slab is the patio area. And there is a wall that comes out a little bit. There's a little bit kind of an area where we could tuck it behind there. So again,
Okay.
it would not be visible from the street.
Right. Anyone else for the moment have any questions? Your architect's done a really nice job of converting the building. You're not doing any addition to the building.
No, sir.
So we're not changing the square footage of the building.
Correct.
It's just really a cosmetic find change on the outside of the building.
Exactly. Yeah, it was two totally separate units and it was kind of a maze to get through there. And so it will be opened up. It'll be a nice, like I said, it will have 13 private offices plus 2 conference rooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, coffee bars. It should be pretty nice. Yes.
I'm having a hard time seeing the small plan. You're removing the existing signage and putting your new signage where the existing signage is now.
Yes, ma'am.
It's that turquoise and white current existing signage. You're gonna replace it with your new design that matches the building.
Exactly.
Okay, I
Yes.
was just trying to picture in my head where your new signage was going to
Correct.
go.
Yes.
Okay, and I do have to compliment your architect as well with that multi-level step in the middle of the hallway. I was like, what in the world? Saw the ramp. So I was like, well done.
Well, good.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, ADA compliance is important. So
Very much so. And that's one of the things that we were very careful to make sure that the kitchen, one of the coffee bars is going to be ADA ready and easily accessible. And then the other one, of course, will be a taller one. But that way we've got ADA accessible throughout the entire building.
yes, and walking the property, those trees are very close up against the building. Did anyone else get a chance to go walk and see how close they are?
I've driven by
Structure.
and some of these really wouldn't even qualify as a protected tree. Some of the
Exactly.
smaller ones. Am I seeing trees behind your building off of your property?
Yes, sir. There's a bunch of trees behind the building that are causing damage to the retainage wall. And some of them are dead already and they're junk trees. As you
Is
can see
that
from
a-
the tree
Is
survey.
that a public easement? Because or is it someone else's property?
I thought it belonged to the city. Honestly, I don't know.
Louis, do you have any comment on that?
I will,
So that it is private property. There is a drainage easement that runs, well, no, I'll take that back, that's on the far side of the property, that's not in the property line. But directly behind 103, that is Castle Hill, the oil change place.
So is there any improvements on that property?
Business, yes.
Okay, well, I don't know that she has the legal right to remove trees on someone else's property. She's going to need to get, I would imagine, the consent to be able to do that.
I believe the trees are on our property because I remember that was one of the things we looked
Okay.
at. We even went through and looked at where the pins were because there was question about the neighborhood, the residential house next to us and where the tree line is. And it actually ends up that our property line, the fence is on our property line. But the trees that are in question that are damaging the fence are not on our property. And so I have already talked to the neighbor about fixing those trees, cutting the trees back before we fix the fence so it wouldn't damage it.
You got their consent.
Yes, sir. He said that he would work with us and he would, in his words, I'll take care of the trees. And so, because I told him we needed to cut them back. One of them actually already fell and damaged the fence. And so he was right there immediately to clean it all up and get it taken care of.
Is he going to remove the trees himself?
I'm not sure about that. He just said that he would definitely take care of the tree portion of it that's leaning on our fence and into the area.
trees
Yeah.
9, 10, and 11. across
No,
the back.
the trees in question are the ones that are in the neighbor's yard. Let me
Behind-
find that sheet of paper real quick.
I think it's behind the building.
Yeah, there's those trees. I'm talking about the trees that are damaging the fence are different trees that I did not take pictures of, but you could kind of see on one of them.
Okay, so they're not
uh,
on your plan.
No, ma'am, but
Okay.
you can see in the pictures where I'm on the street of so they're over here on this side. of the-
Okay, so that's just between you and your neighbor
Yes,
then,
sir.
and the
Yeah, I mean,
city.
yes, ma'am,
Okay.
yes. But I did want to let y'all know that I have already talked to him about what we were wanting to do.
I would suggest you get him to give you a letter so you can document his taking responsibility for those trees
Okay.
are approving your removal of those trees, something that's documented for the city's purpose.
Right, great idea.
David, you've been watching all this. Can you hear me? Did you have some comments?
I hear you just fine, and Ms. Scott clarified which trees we weren't talking about, 9, 10, and 11. I'm still
you-
looking at the tree inventory, and I'm unclear as to which trees we are talking about. Are they on the inventory at all?
I apologize. I was kind of going off a little bit, talking about the neighbors' trees that were hanging over the patio, and no, they are not on the tree inventory since they are not trees I own.
Okay,
The trees in question are in the that I want to remove are in the back of the building. And unfortunately, I don't have my glasses, but they're the ones back here that are the ones that are damaging the drainage area, the retaining wall. And those are the trees in question that I do believe we own based on where the property lines are. I don't think I need to get permission from the oil change place in the back to remove those trees.
are 9, 10, and 11 on the back of your building?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're talking about some more trees that are where 9, 10, and 11 generally are.
There, yes, that whole area, if you look at the pictures, you can see I've got pictures of the back of the building
Mhm.
and you can see where the trees are. So I think it's the second page shows the patio. And the fourth page of pictures shows the back of the building where you can see the trash trees.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you can
And
see on one of them where they're already kind of falling down and kind of already down into the drainage area. And so that's the area that we want to remove those and clean that area up.
Okay. And is that in a drainage easement? I see what looks like a drainage ditch between two sets of trees in that photo.
Correct. It is yes, sir. It is a drainage area because it goes under the bridge. I mean, there's a bridge where it goes under the road. Under Northwest Military.
Okay,
I will point out that the site layout labeled L101 it has a survey of the property, and the surveyor located those trees 9, 10, 11 on the property within the property line.
Great, thank you.
but we're not talking about 9, 10, and 11. We're talking about trees that are not on the tree inventory.
You know, this house, our building occupies such a majority of the property. Can you tell us what the square footage of the building is?
It's about 4,400 square feet.
Have you taken into consideration the number of parking spaces that are required to meet the parking code?
I believe my architect did, in the other plans I have of the full drawing, the full blueprints, I believe there was like 14 parking spots he thought he could get in there. So I believe, because that's what I told him that I was hoping we could get 15, but he feels like he can get 14 in there.
And you're gonna have
Um,
13 offices?
Yes, so 13.
These are offices. I'm not sure that's adequate number of parking spaces, but this may be a grandfathered issue. If it's existing paving, we'd have to get a legal interpretation of that. Mr. Schnall.
I think we start with finding out what the code requirement is for the number of parking spaces, which I believe is based upon the square footage of the improvement.
It is, and I think it's 5 cars per 1,000 square feet, if I'm not mistaken, Louis. Is that true?
Varies quite a bit, sir, depending on the zone. If it's professional, it's one density. If it's retail, it's another density. If it's restaurant, it's yet another density.
How about office?
I can check that.
Would
Um,
you?
Under section 50-257, which is section 50 is one-story office professional under Division 8. So section 50 dash 257 says parking space. Off-street parking spaces shall be provided on the lot to an equal and minimum of one space for each 300 square feet of
300
gross
square
floor area.
If I may check the zone map to see if that zone is valid that you're quoting from.
Yes,
If
sir.
it is indeed, is it an E?
It's an E, yes, sir.
Let me check the zone map to see if it is, it's maybe something different. It may be a G.
If it isn't, if it's something different, let me know because I have it right here. I can,
Have it up.
thank you.
Well, I guess with 300, if it's 300 square feet per parking space, that's around 15, I think, 14 or 15 divided into 4,400, if my math is right.
Wait, the building is 4,400 square feet?
Yes, you would divide it by 300. If that's the regulation.
I come up with 14.66666 spaces.
And I, when I say 44, I'm rounding. I mean, if we want to get down to 0.6666, I am rounding up. I know it was like 40, because I can get you the exact square footage, but it wasn't 44 something, it was like 43 and change, and so if we're going to get down to 0.666, I can get you the exact square footage. But I know it's not over 44.
Well, let's just wait until he can check that, because if you're short of parking based on code, you're going to have to get a variance.
Okay. I can try to text my husband right now to see if he can get me the exact square footage if you'd like.
No, let's find out what Louis found.
Okay.
Property on the G general business.
And what is that code?
G-353 is the one reference I found. Parking, but I haven't had time to dig in deep to discuss what the parking density is in a G. I'm just giving you this information, what I found. 50-353 talks about prohibited parking activities, but it doesn't talk about density. I can have that answer for you, but it's going to take you 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes to get to. But I can have the density answer for you.
So I think it's important that we get that.
I have the section if you'd like it, Louis.
For density,
It says minimum off-street parking requirements for a G general business district is section 50-351. And it gets pretty detailed depending on what the space is being used for specifically. So it says general business and retail. So is this general business retail?
no.
Okay, so it's not personal service establishment.
Could be considered that, but it's more important that it's offices.
It's professional services. We do bookkeeping, payroll, taxes.
Okay, you're right. Everything is listed in here. That's like every qualification under the sun listed in here.
Do they have one under general office?
It says general office. It says offices. This is under J. Offices must have a minimum of one parking space that shall be provided for each 300 square feet of gross
Okay.
floor area. And that would be J. And it's
Okay.
marked just offices is all it says is offices.
Then we can agree that she pretty much makes the density of parking that's required by code. Pardon? Well, yes. Now, are we, do you have a illustration of your signage, your monument sign?
I've got a general, in the last page of the packet showed what I was wanting it to look like. So it's going to be stucco around the sides with a black metal trim and then our logo.
Would they normally have to get their signage approved?
In this particular case, since it's commercial being heard in front of Mark, there is a particular part of the code that talks about or presentation of signs, but to answer your question directly, if it were commercial property on existence coming up with a new monument, it wouldn't necessarily go in front of you. And let me amend that. If it was signage, it would not go in front of you. If it's a creation of a monument, it would, we have precedent with A&M, Ag Park with the signage. So you do actually have purview over monument signage in commercial properties. As far as monuments, the reface is a completely different topic.
So we consider them existing, if they're using the existing monument, but changing the face of it, it's not subject to review?
Are you using the same monument? You're gonna do it?
We're going to replace it with, because the one that's there is plastic and it's in really bad shape. There's no repairing it or fixing it or reusing it. So we're going to have it redone out of cement blocks and stucco with black metal trim. So it'll match the building.
Did y'all find
That
that?
puts it under your purview.
I
It
didn't
should be
see
the
it.
very last
Well-
page of the
Well,
presentation.
then I did have some questions about the signage. I wasn't sure if it was or wasn't. I thought it might be since it was new to the property and you confirmed that, right?
Did
Okay,
you
when you
find it?
state acrylic letters for the 101 Sunflower,
Where-
is that flat acrylics trying to stick it to the stucco, or is it three-dimensional acrylic letters? What kind of,
My first choice would be for it to be three-dimensional standing up on top of it. But when I was talking to the signage, this is what he was telling me. This is what he sent me. And so in this layout, they would be stuck to the stucco.
are
The
they
101
sticking, I guess I'm questioning is, are they three-dimensional letters like sticking out from the stucco
Oh.
versus a flat vinyl acrylic applique?
No, it would be three-dimensional.
Okay, that was my concern. I didn't want
Okay.
you to try to put an acrylic like flat on stucco,
Right,
but
yes.
it's
no,
actually
ma'am.
gonna, okay,
What-
be
Correct.
three-dimensional.
What is contained within these squares?
The white squares would be where our logo would be. So at the very top, it would be the 101 Sunflower Lane to identify the address. And then in the white box would be our logo. And then in the second white box might be, just some, our services, bookkeeping, payroll, taxes. We haven't fully finished out the exact design of what it's going to be, but that's the look of what it's.
Is that gonna be internally lit?
No, it will not be internally lit.
Okay.
I did have a question and maybe the architect can handle this. Did you check sight lines? It's 6 feet tall. So when you're pulling in and out of the building, what are the sight lines like with that being 6 feet tall? And it doesn't, if those white areas are not, you can't see through them, so they're gonna have signage on them. So you're talking 6 feet tall and what was it, 4 feet wide, 48 inches?
Correct. If you look at where it is in the picture above, it's pretty far back from the street. Because we're gonna put it back in the exact same spot where the existing signage is.
Okay, so you have plenty of clearance to pull out and
Plenty of
see
clear-
to
yeah,
get to, okay.
There's easily 4 or 5 feet between the fence, the signage and the street.
Okay, thank you. Now that I found the photo again, I was having a hard time finding. it.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
sorry, yes.
I just wanted to make sure that it gave you good visual to get on, because that street is small and narrow and it's very, it's almost not wide enough for 2 cars at that spot. I'm very familiar with that area.
Okay, yeah.
So, that's why I
ju-
just wanted to make sure it wouldn't be a hindrance to vision of pulling in and out of the space.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see like the white truck that's there, that's parked in, there's plenty of room, even the full bed of the truck is sticking out past the signage. And the truck's not in the street, so there's that much room.
Right. That was just my only question. I just want to make
Okay.
sure that the sight lines were clear to pull in and out of there. Cause like I said, it's so narrow on that street right there coming in and out of, because there's a business parking directly across from you as well.
Correct.
So, okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So you are saving trees 5 and 6. Correct?
That's correct. The ones in well, 5 and 6 are the ones that are the big trees in the middle of the parking lot. And then we're also, there's 2 trees at the street that we're going to
I
be
see.
saving as well.
But those look like they're impeding the parking.
They're very much impeding the parking. It would be, I mean, I, as much as it pains me to say, I would love to take those trees out because they're magnificent trees and they're beautiful. And I would love to do everything in my power to save those trees, but they are very much in our way. In as far as the parking is concerned, it's about, everything having to do with that building, those trees are in the way. But I never dreamed y'all would agree to me taking them out, so that's why I didn't even ask. But, you know, I like I said, I would, as much as it pains me, I would love to take those trees out.
Well,
Just-
would a car be able to even back out at an angle if they're parked like facing the street?
It's tight, but the architect, when he designed the parking lot, he seemed to feel like we could, and that's kind of why he said only 14 cars, because he felt like we had to have, you know, obviously have to have room to get around. But without the trees, it would definitely, we'd be able to easily probably put 20 cars in there.
Am I missing the parking plan? Is it not in the packet?
It's not in the packet, and I apologize that I missed that.
Okay, so we don't have a copy of it here anywhere?
No, I
Louise,
can
like,
get it for you.
No, okay. Yeah, because I'm curious as well, like Mr. Middleman was saying, yeah, those trees definitely impede potentially having your 14-ish spots needed, and I would like to see how 14 spots would fit with those trees in the middle of your lot or parking area.
Correct.
According to BCAD, the living area of 101 Sunflower is 4,816 square feet.
4,800?
4,816 is what BCAD is saying. Obviously, we would have to check that to be sure, because that puts us up to over 16 parking spaces.
Correct. And everything I have, none of the documentation I have says 4,800.
Okay,
That doesn't mean anything, but I'm just, you know, the history of the building, I don't know if y'all know the history of it. It started, the first part is 1940, and then it was added on in 1960, and then added on again in 1980. So there may not be really good square footage documentation for it.
I think that's something we're gonna have to make sure we get checked to ensure that we've got the right, everything is in compliance.
Okay,
I
Well,
wonder-
whether it's 15 or 16 spaces, right now, the applicant says they're only 14. So Mr. Middleman's comment about a variance is well taken. And because the reason that they can only be 14 spaces is to preserve 2 trees, hopefully that would be a compelling reason to the Board of Adjustment, but that's a Board of Adjustment issue.
Agreed.
Well, in the position we're in, can we file a motion of a conditional approval? In order to put that qualification into our approval?
You can point out that the applicant needs to get a variance in regard to the parking requirement. But I think to be fair to the applicant needs to know, you know, whether overall the Architectural Review Committee is willing to recommend City Council approval of the overall plan. And that approval would be sufficient, but for needing to go to the Board of Adjustment in order to complete the work and have the adjustment on the number of parking spaces.
So that's a conditional a motion, right? Of approval.
I have a question. To save the applicant from having to go to the BOA and go through extra steps, could we approve the removal of the trees even though she's not requesting them being removed?
Yes. Or Ms. Scott, maybe just one. I mean, it looked like tree number 2 probably was the one that had the most impact. Tree number 1 is close to the property line. But either removal of either tree 1 or tree 2 could facilitate the architect creating two more parking spaces if the property square footage that Mr. Kilgore pointed out would require 16 parking spaces. I mean, when I did the calculation, it came out to 16.05. So barely over 16. And if as the applicant suggested that the BCAD number may not be completely accurate, I think 16 spaces would address her concern, or the committee's concern, and address her concern. And then the applicant could decide whether to include tree 1 or tree 2 in the final removal of those one or both of those trees as part of the final design. As we all know, trees enhance property, but sometimes compromise has to be made.
Well, functionality
Yeah.
is a very important factor. And we don't want to set any kind of a false precedent here. I wish that there was a way that we could see the parking layout in a survey that shows where the trees are, because it may be necessary to move all those trees in order to really functionally be able to have a driveway for the parking spaces beyond it to get out. You have only one driveway entrance.
Correct. I could probably email it to y'all. I've got it because the architect sent it to me in an email, so I could forward y'all the full built blueprint plan that had the parking lot on it. I know I had previously sent it to you. I don't know if you still have it.
Oh, let me check.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at the photo. Mr. Middleman, the very, let's see, it's the third page of photos at the top. My question is, if removing the crepe myrtle and that island around it, if we could see a parking plan, that might just be enough space to add those extra 2 spaces and be
When you
done
look
with
at
it if we could see the plan.
Right, I think, because I had previously emailed it, so he's gonna go look and see if he can find it. The area where the crepe myrtle is kind of a triangular kind of space. And I don't think it might allow for one more spot, but it would be really tight because of, again, it's a triangle. It's not a true, you couldn't put a car where that space is.
We really want to try and approve it tonight, but I think there's a lack of information that are kind of holding us back. We don't want to set a precedent. We don't really want to take the trees down either.
Yes, I
Uh,
understand.
I don't know. It might be worth going before the Board of Adjustment, because I believe, Ms. Scott, that this is definitely a hardship on meeting the parking requirements. I take that back. We're trying to save the trees. It is somewhat of a hardship, but you really are anxious to save those trees for aesthetic reasons. So you'd like a variance on the number of parking spaces to accommodate the trees.
Well, I honestly, if we could take the trees out, it would definitely be more beneficial for us for the parking, because we do, we want to be able to have, like I said, networking events and things. So, I mean, the more parking, the better. So as much as it pains me to ask to take the trees out, I would be okay with taking them out. I just didn't think y'all would allow it. And that's why we didn't ask to begin with to take them out.
David, do you have a comment on that? Because we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place here. We want to save the trees, but we have to meet the parking requirements based on code.
Yeah, and looking at it, frankly, to me, it seems like 5 and 6 are the impeding trees, not so much 1 and 2. That crepe myrtle,
No, you're right. You're right.
and 5. I'm sure this is a typo, because it says that the DBH of tree number 6 is 8 feet. Don't think that's correct. And tree number 5 is 8 feet 10 inches. I don't think that's correct either. But we need to see,
Doesn't look
where
like
those
it.
trees fall on the protectable / heritage scale to see what is
I don't know
involved
if they're,
in
they may
removing
not be
those.
heritage. They may not be heritage, but they certainly are more than 8 inches.
Yeah,
Yeah, the DBH is incorrect on all of these trees.
yeah.
Yeah, the DBH was not marked
So-
properly on this chart.
So my thought is that we just don't have enough information ourselves to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If we can get the BOA to offer a variance on the number of parking spaces, then we can save 5 and 6. If BOA says no variance, then I think we've got a different set of problems on our hands.
What'd you say of BOA what?
If they will grant a variance on the parking space requirement,
To
so that
save
we
the
can,
trees.
we can save the trees. If they won't grant the variance, then we've got another set of problems on our hands to determine the fate of those trees. I would rather see the BOA grant a variance and save the trees. But if they won't, then we've got to have another discussion.
When does the BOA meet? On call? The fourth Monday?
But I have a question on this plan anyway. I don't see how you could get around tree 5 and 6 to get to those parking spaces on the other side of the trees from the driveway.
And I think that's the other point that we've been making is we need to see the parking plan, see what magic the architect has
Oh.
come up with.
Mr. Kilgore, we do have a copy here in front of us of the parking plan. They just handed it out.
Can you email it to me, please?
It's the page
Louis-
labeled L101.
Louis sending it to you now.
Thank you very much.
But
Louis-
from what I'm seeing, unless there are open parking spots on one side or the other of trees 5 and 6, there isn't a way to drive around them to get to the spots on the other side. And if you drive around and park over there, you could potentially get stuck. Unless I'm just misinterpreting the plan. So my point being is even with a variance of 14 spots, I still don't think all 14 are accessible with the trees. What do you think, Mr. Millman? Have you
Well,
seen
I
the
don't think
plan?
we have adequate information, frankly.
You don't have the,
I've seen this and I don't count. I don't know what is that object on the left-hand side of the, it looks like is that a truck? I can't read that writing. It's so small.
that's the construction dumpster.
Well, it's a flower bed area that we are going to be removing. And
Okay.
so that's what that little outshoot is in the tree drawing where you can see. So there's a little flower bed that we will be removing.
You know, that's an awful wide handicap space. Is it just one handicap space? Is that what I'm reading?
I'm not sure. I don't have that in front of me to be able to say. I'm not sure.
You want to look at this drawing?
Unfortunately, I forgot my glasses in my office. I ran out to get them.
Yeah, I'm questioning if it's a ramp.
It is a ramp. So you're over here, there's the little line, that's the where there's gonna be the handicap spot to go in. And then I believe there's another one, I believe there's 2 handicap parking, one on either side of the front door.
Let me see. Well, I can tell you that handicap space requirement is really only 8 feet, as long as you have 1 8-foot for van accessible. And then the other one would have a 5-foot a hash. But if you could squeeze that down to an 8-foot space where that 5-foot striping is, you might be able to get another car diagonally, another space diagonally to get one more car there.
My concern, Mr. Middleman, is the oval space there between the ramp and the parking street side, which is where those two trees are. And the ability to get cars around one side or the other of it if the parking lot is mostly full.
Well, it also, that hash mark coming off of Sunflower is supposed to be an accessible route onto the site. And those trees impede that also. It's supposed to stripe all the way on the paving, all the way from the street front to the building for people that are come by bus or if they're come other way. You know, I hate to say it, but I think that the only way we really could feasibly approve this would be probably to require the removal of those trees. I think those are just really impeding this site. Now, if we approve it under those terms and council has an issue with it, then you could go for BOA and maybe get a Board of Adjustment variance.
Mr. Middleman, it's certainly up to the Architectural Review Committee what its recommendation to council would be. But one thing to consider is to give the applicant the option of either going forward with removal of trees 5 and 6 or seeking a variance. But whatever the recommendation of the Architectural Review Committee is, we need to get that very specific in the form of a motion this evening.
Well, that seems reasonable that we give our approval of the based on the removal of the trees, or give the applicant a option of going before the Board of Adjustment for variance in order to preserve the trees. Isn't that kind of what you're saying, Mr. Schnall?
Well, I was kind of reacting to what Ms. Scott's original question during this discussion was, would it be possible for the Architectural Review Committee to recommend approval of removal of additional trees not marked in red on the tree removal page? And the answer to that question is yes. And so what I was trying to do is give the idea to the committee that one option is exactly what the chairman said. Just approve it inclusive of the removal of trees 5 and 6, or to do it with an either or. And, I think, it just depends on what her architect can do in terms of addressing the concern Ms. Scott raised about inaccessibility of those parking spaces. There may not even be 14 accessible parking spaces with where trees 5 and 6 are located, which makes me move back toward your original statement. Just approve it with the understanding that trees 5 and 6 are going to go, and that's troubling because of the loss of the tree canopy. But there are other trees the applicant is preserving.
Well, at that point, there are 2 trees, I believe, that are being preserved out of the 11 on the property. Trees number 1 and tree number 2 are the only ones being preserved.
Well, David, we've got to discount the fact that these trees are either dying or are a nuisance, or even smaller than even required as a protected tree. So if she were doing a tree survey on the site, she wouldn't even have to show any trees that would be less than, I believe we've made it 8 inches.
I agree. And looking at the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in excellent health. 5, 6 are in good health, and then they start to deteriorate from there.
Yes, my concern is that if we don't go ahead and give permission to remove 5 and 6, the property owner is not going to be able to use the parking space. Even with a variance, she's not going to be able to have access to those spaces in the back. And it pains me because to take out trees 5 and 6, they're beautiful. But as Mr. Kilgore pointed, they are already in declining condition. So we're not sure how many more years they would have left on them anyway, but they are
Well-
such an impediment to the use of the property.
5 and 6 are in good condition, good
Oh, they're in
health.
good condition. I'm sorry, I
They're in
misunderstood.
good health, yes.
They are in good
And
health.
their growth condition is also good. No, excuse me, it's fair, pardon me. So they're, about midland trees.
Did you receive the parking plan yet, Mr. Kilgore?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
I'm
good.
looking at it. And I do have a question on the parking plan. That crosshatch area directly, I would say, across from the landscaping curb where 5 and 6 are. Is that crosshatch indicating that all of that space is for handicap parking access, or what's the crosshatch on that?
That would be,
You talking about the one on facing Sunflower?
No, I'm talking about the one facing the building on the opposite side of trees 5 and 6, between trees 5 and 6 in the building.
I believe that's area where the architect did not feel a car could park.
With 5 and 6 there, I certainly agree with him or her.
Correct.
Right.
So where's
But
the
I-
second handicap space?
Yeah, I only see one handicap space on the parking lot.
Okay, I thought there was another one on the other side. I do apologize. Like I said, I don't have my glasses with me, so I do apologize. But I thought there were 2 in the front.
I only see one handicap symbol, one
And
wheelchair
you
symbol.
you have to have van accessibility on at least one handicap space, which would mean you'd have to have 8 foot of striping on the passenger side for vans to be able to slide open to bring a wheelchair out through there. But if you were to do, have your architect lay out the handicap spacing on either side of a 8 foot striping, it would satisfy both the handicap spaces, because you have to have a van accessible, and then it would also be accessible from the driver's side, that same 8 foot strip of hazard striping. I think your architect, if we ask for the removal of those trees, I think it also has to be based on the parking count being in conformance with the ordinance. And so your architect's going to have to reconfigure this parking in such a way to receive the number of parking spaces that the code would allow, especially since we're going to the trouble of maybe removing these trees. Otherwise, you'd have to go before the Board of Adjustment because of a lack of adequate parking. So I would say that before you're going to be able to get a building permit, he's going to need to illustrate that he has adequate parking to meet the code, because because we've been able to ask you to remove those 2 trees that impede the parking.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that the committee might do is whatever your recommendation is, it could also be contingent upon the applicant bringing to the city prior to the council meeting, the revised parking plan, a plan that is based upon the removal of trees 5 and 6. And that way the council would have that information. And when it makes its decision on this application, it would know whether or not the parking meets the minimum in the city ordinance, or that the applicant would still need to go before the Board of Adjustment. I think not leaving it open, but putting the burden on the applicant to get that kind of a parking plan to the city so the council would have it before the meeting next Tuesday evening might be something y'all could consider.
Any comments? This is a difficult problem, but
It's
we just need to word it right.
it's difficult. I could attempt to make a motion and let's see if I can word it where it will work well in taking in Mr. Snall's consideration. So I move to approve the removal of the requested trees, including in addition to those trees number 5 and 6, if the applicant can bring a revised parking plan that meets the current ordinance before council,
You haven't, I don't think you've addressed approval of the whole project, have you? Aren't you just qualifying the trees? Did you say we're on approval?
my beginning of the motion was to approve the project
Okay,
and the removal of the trees that they're requesting. In addition to that, trees 5 and 6, if the applicant can bring the revised parking plan that will meet our current ordinance to council.
I
I'm waiting for Mr. Schnall to make sure. that
am too.
That's clear.
I think Ms. Scott's motion is adequate as she restated it, and it needs a second before it can be discussed.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been made and seconded.
So now we can discuss it even more. So what does everyone think?
Well, I mean, we could take a vote of your motion unless there's any further discussion. I really think this architect needs to go to work at providing the new parking layout. And I think that I don't have it in front of me, but I think code may require 2 handicap spaces for this square footage of building. And because it's based on that requirement. Yes, if he can, if I think that it'll be his problem to be able to solve prior to the council. Otherwise, all we've done is approve the removal of the trees.
Okay. I feel confident that he can get that done for us get it to y'all before the council meeting next week.
Well, would she be giving it to us?
No,
Well,
sir, she should get it to Mr. Rapley, Ms. Franco, or Mr. Zamaron.
Right. It'll be past the Architecture Review Committee already.
Okay,
It would
not a
go
problem.
past us, but the motion is clear that your parking would have to meet city ordinance with the correct number of
Right.
ADA parking, accessible parking,
Okay,
and the correct number of spots for the square footage. Because, that's
correct.
part of the motion, right?
But
That's how the motion reads, that it would have to meet all of
Yeah.
the requirements.
And we'll
Right,
also
but-
need an
but
accurate
Ms. Scott,
square
to be
footage.
clear, it also would allow, it also takes into account, the way you worded it,
Mm.
the applicant could also seek a variance.
Yes.
A variance could put her in compliance with our ordinance parking requirements because the Board of Adjustment has the jurisdiction and the authority to grant a variance from that requirement. But so this in fact incorporates the idea of the either or, but I think it makes it clear, I think the discussion makes it clear that although all of us want to preserve the trees, we also want to respect the property owner's ability to utilize the building as intended. So I do think that works. I do think that if there is no further discussion, a vote on the motion is appropriate, but if there is discussion, that should ensue first.
I have a question as the motion is currently written. Is there a scenario under which the trees go away and the owner still needs a variance to meet parking?
Yes, there is such a scenario,
Okay,
but that's not for us to say.
That's Mr. Middleman's right. And as I think Mr. Middleman also pointed out earlier in the meeting, that the first step is this meeting and the recommendation from the ARC. The second step is going before City Council and getting City Council's approval. The third step is a building permit. And at that stage, Mr. Zamaron and others will determine whether the use is a permitted use in the zoning district and whether the parking requirements are satisfied.
And if
Okay.
they're not, and they negate the building permit, then you're going to have to go before the Board of Adjustment and get a variance.
To get the building permit, the applicant would then have to go to the Board of Adjustment.
Right.
But I think
Right.
as has been suggested, that removal of those trees will open up accessibility to additional parking spaces and will probably also allow the applicant, the architect to design a parking plan that meets the additional handicapped space requirement that the chair discussed.
mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess the motion, as far as I can see, has been made and seconded. If there's no other discussion, let's call for approval of the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous approval. But of course, Ms. Rogers, you understand it's kind of a conditional approval. We're allowing you to remove the trees, but you still have to meet the parking regulations or you won't get a building permit.
Correct. I understand that. And I greatly appreciate y'all, your attention to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending. The next item on the agenda is our tree ordinance. Boy, I'm sorry, I suggested this about over a year ago. We probably never had so many architecture review committee meetings in the history of Castle Hills in any one calendar year. But having said that, it's my understanding, having missed a couple of the meetings, that the council was unclear regarding the definition of the keeping score of the protected and mitigation methods, and needed to have a clarification of that. I'm just opening the floor to that. Is that what you believe was the one crux that they had disapproved?
Mr. Chairman, I don't remember that at all. Mr. Kilgore was there with me at that meeting, the city council meeting in April. The direction I remember receiving from the city council was, we want to see a red line showing every change that the ARC is recommending be made to chapter 48. Chapter 48 is titled Vegetation. And so immediately after that meeting, within a day or business day or two after that meeting, I produced a red line, a compare document that compared the current chapter 48 and showed on a copy of that in red line and blue line what changes the ARC recommended. And the main items that I remember being discussed at the ARC meeting in April, where Mr. Middleman was not able to be present, were the list of DBHs by tree, diameter at breast health per tree, and a comparison of the recommendations that came from a state listing and the recommendations from an arborist, and the wording of section 48-25. But the council's direction to us, as I recall, and again, I would like to know whether Mr. Kilgore remembers anything different, was to produce a red line so they could see what the changes were. And so that red line was produced, and I believe that document has been sent to the city council. If it has not already been sent, it will be in the packet that will get circulated to council in 48 hours plus or minus, when the packet for the city council meeting next Tuesday night will be made available to the council and put on the website.
How about that, David? Do you recollect anything beyond that?
No, I think the red line was the big thing that multiple members of the council requested. I do think that there was some concern about the clarity of 4825, the preservation and mitigation calculations, making sure that that is as simply worded and clear as possible. And then the opening table of DBHs. But yeah, basically what Mr. Schnall pointed out is what I remember as well.
Well, I attempted to do a clarification of that section of the of our ordinance to try and clarify it by doing an actual exhibit, graphic exhibit of how we would conduct such a count on caliper inches. And I gave examples of 3 or 4 different species, the number of them and the sizes of them, and got to a total number of caliper inches, and then showed what 40% of that referenced that had to be preserved, 20 of which could be preserved by way of a mitigation of either planting the equivalent in the required caliper inches of the 20% that could be mitigated either in planting the equivalent of trees representing any or all of the 20%, or pay a mitigation fee, which was outlined in how much it was. I gave all that explanation in my exhibit. It may not have been clear enough, but I felt like if we gave them an example rather than just wording the ordinance, it would give them a clear picture, as well as applicants a clear picture. But Mr. Schnall has looked at it and feels like it's still probably a little bit too complicated. And so I'm not sure how we'll deal with that one issue unless it doesn't come up again in council.
I'm pretty sure it will. I think at the next council meeting, just having the red line in their hands will be helpful. Because that's really, I think, the big thing that bothered them was you've given us a a new document and you haven't told us how it's different from the old document. And I can sympathize with that position of theirs.
And, you know, I agree with Mr. Kilgore. The thought I had was to see if the consensus of the ARC would be that a exhibit of some kind or a document of some kind, which would be based upon what Mr. Middleman has circulated, be prepared in conjunction with city staff, where Mr. Zamaron and Mr. Middleman and I, for example, would put together an exhibit of this kind that would be made available to anyone who came and sought a permit for tree removal. And that way, that exhibit, that information would be available, but it wouldn't be embedded into the ordinance because frankly, we don't have time to embed it into the ordinance right now. But if the consensus of the ARC is that this kind of a document would be very helpful to applicants, then we could move forward and create something like that. And I'm welcome for another member of the ARC or even two other members of the ARC being involved in this process, sort of like the subcommittee that you all had to deal with something else earlier this year, so that we could put together a document that everyone felt was going to be very helpful to the applicants going forward. And I think the council would be receptive to knowing that that process would be done and perhaps not delay the actual adoption of the ordinance. But as Mr. Kilgore said, we don't know what the council is going to do next Tuesday night.
Well, the only comment I'd make about that is approving it based on what you're saying. But the reason I had kind of wanted it somehow in the body of our ordinance was because people that were actually going to apply would have a clearer picture of how to do their calculations before they had to go before and discuss it with staff. It would have been more clarified for them to prepare their trees, protected tree count, but this could go on forever.
Well,
the way
Mr.
we're
Middleton,
doing this.
Mr. Middleton, there's a way to accomplish that. That's a fair comment, I think, and an important one. Is if we can get a document like this prepared, it could go on the website right with the application that's on the website for tree removal. And that way, I'm not trying to hide this. I'm just trying to say, I don't think we can produce this in 2 business days. I don't think we can produce this in time for a packet to be sent out to council at 5:30 on Friday.
And also if we run into a problem in the review process because of the lack of knowledge by the people making the submittal, then we can always do an amendment to our ordinance at some future time. So I'd like to, unless there's other comments, I think we've got the answer in this document now with the red line differential with the existing ordinance. And unless somebody has another comment, I'd like to call for a motion of the approval of our tree ordinance as written.
Unfortunately, I do have a comment.
Okay.
Sorry about that. My concern is if 4825 needs a supplemental document to explain 4825, 4825 may be too complicated. Is there a way to simplify 4825 itself in the time that we have to get this before council?
Gotta look at this again.
I actually thought about that, Mr. Kilgore, if there was a way to reword it. I couldn't come up with a clearer wording. I don't know if you were able to.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
anytime
in
you
the
have a
same,
math word problem, people kind of freak out. All the way back to elementary school, anytime you had a word problem that had a math word problem, people kind of look at it and their eyes glaze over. And I think there's a little bit of panic there. So
yeah,
in looking at the second paragraph, which reads, up to 20% of the total DBH, or actually if you start at the very beginning, was saying that, they have to have at least, 40% of the total DBH of protectable trees in their tree log preserved. It's not a simple math problem, word problem, math problem, but it's one that if you sit and break it down section by section, it is solvable.
yeah.
I couldn't figure out a way to word it any clearer than it is now. I do think an exhibit would help clarify it in the fact that it's given to all applicants. It's on the website with the application. And then it's also distributed to the applicant when they show up with their permit. I think that is like the best solution or compromise we could come up with before sending it back to council, if they were only asking for a red line and not specifically asking for clarification on mitigation.
Well, let me suggest this. Let's take some numbers out of it. So looking at paragraph 1, sentence 2. Currently reads at least 20%, pair and half of the required 40%. Why don't we take out the 20% and the parentheses and just say at least half of the required 40% of the DBH must be preserved?
Could do that.
And looking, same concept in paragraph 2, where it says up to 20% of the total DBH, pair and half of the required 40%. Simplify that further to just say up to half of the required 40% may be removed, but must be mitigated. Take some of the numbers out of it.
Well, the only thing is, do we have time to make those grammatical changes, Mr. Schnall, for the next council meeting?
Those changes we could make tomorrow. I don't know whether Mr. Rapley or staff have already circulated the red line to members of the governing body. I don't think they have, but I don't know. If it has not been circulated, then it's easy to do. If it has been circulated, when we put it on the packet for the council, we just say that the ARC at its meeting on June 7th, in an effort to simplify the wording, made these two changes. And Mr. Kilgore, keep going if you've got others. I can certainly produce this kind of a change. I can easily produce between now and Friday morning.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, those if the ARC votes to reword the first paragraph of 4825 and the second paragraph of 4825, as Mr. Kilgore is suggesting, we will get that done on a red line by Friday morning.
Well, let's see how council reacts.
Yeah,
That's
Let's
the
look-
key.
let's look at paragraph 3, the exception, because as I'm reading through it, I'm fumbling over words. Removal of any heritage tree requires approval of the city manager or their designee. That's fine. The removal of any heritage tree must be mitigated by the applicant by the following, singly or in combination. I think there needs to be a comma between following and singly, but that's planting equal to the equivalent DBH of the removed heritage tree of approved trees with a minimum of 2-inch DBH per planted approved tree. It's a mouthful of words, but it may be the right mouthful of words. Anybody have comments on that? Roman numeral 1?
It almost sounds like it's stating the same thing twice.
We hadn't addressed heritage trees in the first two paragraphs.
Right.
Now
How
we
does-
have.
What about planting strike equal to? So it reads planting the equivalent DBH of the removed heritage tree.
Does it need to read removed heritage tree of approved trees or just read remove a heritage tree and strike of approved trees?
The way I'm reading it, of approved trees is telling you what you can put in place of your heritage tree. So if we do
But we have it
planting,
there and then we have it after the 2-inch DBH again per planted
right,
approved tree. So one of those approved trees should be stricken because we're saying it twice.
I agree with you.
There's one other thing I've noticed and I think should be added, not taken away. But in the first sentence, in the first paragraph, the owner must preserve a minimum of 40% of the total DBH. Could we put in parentheses caliper inches?
No, because caliper inches isn't a defined term in this ordinance. DBH is our defined term.
All right, well, so we don't have caliper
Nope,
as a definition.
that's correct.
I hope they'll understand what DBH equates to.
The definition is pretty clear. And DBH is a common definition in other ordinances and other tree sources that I looked at. So I think DBH is going to work for us.
Well, let's see how, this is all new territory.
Mr. Medlin, if we can return to heritage trees for just a minute and addressing Ms. Scott's comment. What if Romanet 1, which currently begins planting equal to blah, blah, blah. What if that read planting approved trees with a minimum of 2-inch DBH in an amount equal to the DBH of the removed heritage tree?
I like that.
I like that wording a lot.
Okay, so let's include that as a potential change. Mr. Kilgore, can that be part of your motion?
Yes, it can, if I can remember it.
And you,
I wrote it down, so you.
Good.
Okay. And then I was curious, could this be a combination of both planning some equivalent DBH and also paying the $100 per
per inch.
per DBH that's not done?
I think it can, the way the first sentence of the exception paragraph is written, mitigated by the applicant by the
Yes.
following singly or
Singly or in
In
combination.
the combination, yeah, it just,
Okay.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
they
it already
can
says
do
that.
it they can do that 20% can
They
be mitigated either or
Okay.
whatever
Yeah.
quantity.
No, I agree that I had forgotten about that language.
So it's clearly one or two or combination thereof.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Now, is Romanet 2 clearly worded? One of the things that I am concerned about in Romanet 2 is the mitigation fee of $100. At one time, because this whole exception is about heritage trees, we said heritage trees were more expensive to take out than plain old protected trees. And we talked about a $300 per DBH mitigation fee for heritage trees.
And that's in here still on the second line.
It goes for
On the
commercial.
next page, which is that if the heritage tree to be removed was not on an owner occupied property in the 4 named zoning districts, then that's when the $300 kicks in to discourage people from not planting trees and encourage the planting of trees to mitigate rather than paying the fee.
Okay,
David, that was shot down, I think by our committee at one of the meetings
Well-
because they felt like the $100 would be more suitable for residential
Right.
ownership.
Un-
And
That's
the-
why this language ended up in the ordinance.
Right, exactly. And the $300 was for commercial development zoning.
Right. An owner occupant can go for $100. A developer goes for $300.
Basically, yes.
That's fine. Just, I hadn't flipped all the way over to the next page when I raised my question.
Yeah.
In any event,
In-
I would say this is a pretty darn good ordinance, if I do say so myself. We've worked very hard on this, and I think if it's as clear as the city just wanting to compare it, the council wanting to compare it to the old ordinance, then I think we've hit a home run on this.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kilgore, I think now, if I'm speaking for him a little bit, Mr. Kilgore suggested that in the first paragraph under 4825, I got to turn back the page to this, look at it now. In the first paragraph of 4825, the second sentence would simply begin 1/2 of.
at
and
least half of the required.
1/2 of the
40%.
required,
Mhm.
40%. And then the second paragraph would begin 1/2 of the required 40%.
Up to half
then-
of the required 40%.
And then the Romanet 1 in the third paragraph, the paragraph captured exception would read, planting approved trees with a minimum of 2-inch DBH in an amount equal to the DBH of the removed heritage tree.
Mhm.
Is there a second to Mr. Kilgore's motion?
There is a second.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, you now have a motion and a second with the changes I just read. Is there further discussion, or is it time for a vote?
I'd say if there's no other discussion, somebody second Ms. Scott's.
No,
My
Ms. Scott seconded my motion that Mr. Schnall
Oh,
read.
it
for
was
me.
already seconded. Okay, let's all in favor, raise our hand. It's unanimous approval to go to council.
No, that was just for the changes.
that was
wording, correct?
Yeah, that was changes for that wording.
But I thought the committee already voted to send it to council.
I think we had, hadn't we?
Oh, okay, that's
Um,
fine. With the changes, perfect.
It went to
And,
As-
council.
well.
As amended.
I will add these changes so that what the council gets Friday will include these last cleanup changes. I would ask that someone from the ARC be at the council meeting. The chairman or one of the other members, so that this group will be represented in person on Tuesday evening to kind of answer any council questions. I will be there, but I think it's also important for a member of the ARC to be there if possible.
Let's see. What is the date?
The 13th at 6:30.
Okay, just a second.
I believe there was one at a prior meeting of the ARC.
I can attend that meeting that night. Can you pull some weight and get us first on the agenda?
The agenda right now puts this kind of at the I think it's 6.6, I think, on the agenda, something like that. The first two agenda items, the first items on the draft agenda relate to Ms. Rogers.
Okay,
And then there are a couple of items on the draft agenda relating to the city's comprehensive plan. And this comes, I think, maybe right after that, and that's tentative. I mean, we do not have a final final agenda at this point. It's still under development. We can see how quickly we can get to it.
Okay.
And
Uh,
Mr. Middleman, I can also plan
Okay,
on
that's
being
fine.
here,
Anyone-
so.
Anyone from our committee is welcome to be there when one of us falters.
Yeah,
Just in
plan on
case
being
it
there
goes
as well.
long.
2 or 3 members are fine, 6 members not fine. Okay, because then we run into an open meetings issue with having the quorum of this committee is 4. So we can have 3 people come to the city council meeting and speak if necessary. But I would be reluctant if there were a 4th member coming in speaking, because then we would have a potential argument about an Open Meetings Act violation. So it's best just to avoid that risk.
So David, were you planning on being there otherwise?
Good Lord willing, the creek don't rise. Yeah.
What's that?
He said,
Yes.
Okay, so why didn't it be Miss Scott, David, regular committee members, and me to attend that night? Just those 3.
okay,
All right.
Don't go hide in case we need to.
okay.
All right, so
Before we adjourn,
yes,
I would like to read through the in any event paragraph and make sure that it's got the right words and intents in it. And I promise not to read through any more of it after we get through that paragraph. In any event, a credit for tree planting equal to the tree mitigation fee shall be provided to a person if the property is an existing 1-family or 2-family dwelling that is the person's residence. In other areas, we've referred to people as owner occupants, and we've listed them by their zoning district, the A, AA, B, RR, et cetera. Do we need to consider that in the first sentence of in any event? I'm just raising the question. A perfectly reasonable answer is no, we do not. It just doesn't seem to follow the same language structure that we've used elsewhere in 4825.
Mr. Kilgore, I'm all in favor of continuity, so people do not get confused. So how would you suggest it read that a credit for tree planting equal to the tree mitigation fee shall be provided to a person if the property is an existing 1-family or 2-family dwelling that is owner occupied property?
I would say shall be provided to an owner occupant if the property is owner occupied resident. I don't think we need the owner occupied again. Is residential property in the A, AA, B, or RR zoning district. Same structure that we used in the line at the very top of that page. A credit for tree planting equal to the tree mitigation fee shall be provided to an owner occupant of a property in the A, AA, B, or RR zoning district.
And that would complete that sentence.
That would complete that sentence.
I like the rewording, but I'm totally confused by the whole sentence. Because does this mean that an owner occupied property doesn't pay any mitigation fee?
Well, that was a follow-up question, is where is this credit coming from and what's it going to?
I mean, it's like, we say that you've got to plant, you got to do at least some planting. And if, minimum 2-inch DBH, or you need to pay the mitigation fee of $100 per DBH. If the removed tree is on an owner occupied residential property in those 4 zoning districts.
What is the
And then the
impact
next
to the
paragraph
ord?
says in any event, you don't have to pay it because you get a credit. I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm asking, I think, what's the result of striking the in any event paragraph in its entirety?
Actually, I do believe that would clarify things a lot. That would clarify it. Because even I was confused. In any event, what credit? A credit for tree planting equal to, yeah, and that just is, I think that may be the paragraph that's making this so confusing.
I think the point was that if somebody planted trees, they got credit for that towards the mitigation fee if they did not meet the required DBH to satisfy the meet the required DBH by planting alone.
Okay, because I thought that was pretty clear in the previous paragraph where you could do singly or in combination.
Well, no,
Plant
but this is
trees.
also saying you get a credit for planting against them. You get a credit for doing one against number two.
But that's not what the previous paragraph says. The previous paragraph says that you either plant trees or you pay a mitigation fee or you do a combination thereof. So
Right. It is in conflict.
it's in conflict to what we've just said. So either you're getting the extra credit you're talking about for planting versus paying the mitigation, or you're not. So I'm all for clarity. Either plant more trees or pay the mitigation or do the combination that you want to do. Get rid of in any event, any credit for planting trees versus mitigation, and just clarify where the money's going to go, which is in that last paragraph.
I'd like to make a motion that we strike the in any event paragraph.
The whole paragraph?
The whole paragraph. My feeling is that it is restating yet obfuscating the prior paragraphs.
For purposes of discussion, there needs to be a second.
I will second Mr. Kilgore's motion. So we can discuss it.
Mhm.
Could you explain to me again, Jason, exactly what you meant about that paragraph giving credit for planting trees over paying mitigation fees? Because I'm a little confused there. I don't
Because
remember that.
that's the way I read it. Read this paragraph, and I'm not saying it's not in conflict. It's just, it is a very confusing. But I think the point was, if you plant trees, but you don't plant enough trees to satisfy the 40% preservation, and then you got a credit for what you planted against the mitigation fee, but your mitigation fee could still be higher than that because you're not reaching the right level.
But doesn't it say that they're saying in part thereof, it can be,
No, they
all
are
under-
saying that in the previous paragraph, but we're also giving them, the point I think of this was to give people credit to encourage them to plant more trees than to pay the mitigation fee. I think. I don't
But
know. I don't remember anymore. at this
I was
We-
point.
thinking, I guess, because it says it in the combination of the two, the doing the fine or doing the fee and planting, or either or, can be both.
Singly or in
All one,
combination. yeah.
all the
All be
other,
all
or
one
a
or
combination.
Combination,
Yeah,
both,
so-
right.
And that's why I was confused, because we say in the previous paragraph, okay, this is what it's going to take if for an owner occupied property, and this is what it's going to take for a non-owner occupied property. And it's like what the first paragraph giveth, the second paragraph taketh away. And that just, it doesn't make sense to me. So if I were on this committee, I'd vote in favor of Mr. Kilgore's motion, but I don't get to vote.
I understand what you were saying. I think there was discussion to try to encourage people to plant trees versus whipping out their checkbook and paying the mitigation fee. But it doesn't sound like we
We didn't do it
crafted
the
a
right way.
document very well. And at this point, this late in the process, do we really want to recraft this to make that happen? Or do we just want to say,
No, I wouldn't
leaning
put it
towards
in
the
because when you're talking about planting 2-inch trees and you have maybe 50 inches of tree that have to be mitigated, that's 25 trees that be planted that may not be room for in their yard. So
Well,
I
you-
think it should be left just the way it is and let them make that option, however they choose to do so.
So let the homeowner decide from the first paragraph. So, and that's what our motion on the table right now is to get rid of that in any event paragraph, which gives all the discretion to the property owner.
Yeah, I don't think the in any event paragraph brings anything to the party that is not already in the first two paragraphs of this section.
I agree.
Okay, well then we've got a motion. Do I hear a second?
I already seconded it, Mr.
Oh, you
Middleman,
did?
so
It's just
Um,
discussion.
Okay.
discussing,
Without
but we
any
can
other
vote on it.
discussion, all in favor? Raise your
Aye.
hand. Unanimous approval. With that, I'd
All
like
right.
to call for adjournment of the meeting at 8:25 PM.
I'll move, we adjourn.
Well done. You can leave too, then.
Thank you, David.
Now you can call.
Ah, you're welcome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.